It is 15 minutes now after the hour. We're joined with Pastor Matt Canoles of the Cedar Creek Cowboy Church in the Fayetteville, Childersburg area. And Pastor, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Jimmy. How are you?
I'm well. Good to have you with us. You're just flying back in from Las Vegas?
Yes, sir. Just barely.
What's
we came
going
in
on
last
there,
night.
man?
Me and my family got to go to the NFR, the National Finals Rodeo. They have it's a Super Bowl rodeo, so it's a 10-day deal. We got to go out there for a couple days. So. Yes,
oh,
so
that was refreshing for you.
I don't know about refreshing, but yes, sir, it was nice.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You flying back in on the red eye for
yes,
sure.
Sir.
So, Cedar Creek Cowboy Church, you've been there since 2015.
Yes, sir.
Tell us how this came about and where we are today.
Man, well, it's kind of the same story. We practiced team roping on Thursday nights, and me and a couple of guys got together and we're like, hey, we'd like to try to do a Bible study. For those guys that were coming to rope that we kind of felt like wouldn't attend church with us anywhere. And that rocked on there for 4, 5, 6 months. And somebody came along and said, man, why don't we have a church and do a cowboy church? And I'm like, well, I'd never heard of that. And I'd grown up in church my whole life and didn't know exactly what that looked like.
You didn't sign up for that,
no,
though,
I didn't. And so, but I was all for it. And so we were like, hey, let's find a pastor. And so we started looking, and there's 2 or 3 men here in town that I really thought were supposed to be that guy. And, man, just through prayer and maybe default, I remember that first Wednesday night, it was my responsibility to find somebody to speak. And by about Wednesday morning, I hadn't found anybody yet. And so they were like, well, who's going to speak tonight? And I said, well, I guess I'll take care of it tonight. And I guess almost 10 years later, here we are.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, wow, that's a great story. You got a special Christmas event coming up. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, sir. So I think this is our 6th year that we've done the Nativity Walk, and I love, even as a kid, I love going to see a live nativity. But we actually started, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years ago. My brother was living in Eclectic, and so he invited us down, and Eclectic does a big nativity walkthrough deal, and I'd never seen anything like what they did, and man, it was such a blessing to take my family down there.
Mm-hmm.
and they would always have multiple scenes, and so we went to that deal for a couple of years, and then one year we called to make reservations and we couldn't get in, and so they were already booked up, and I think they do their deal for a whole week. But so me and my wife were talking and like, well, hey, let's try to do that here. And there were several people from our church that had started going with us on that. And so we all sat down and just decided we would try to do that at the church. And I think the first year we did it, we had 4 scenes. And this year we're up to 8 or 9. So it's a cool deal. It's more than just a drive up and look, and it's an interactive kind of deal that we do, just like, and that's what they do in Eclectic. So.
Do you need reservations or anything?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's absolutely free. There's no cost. It's not a money-making deal whatsoever. We want people to come and experience it for free, but we do require, because we do try to keep the groups down to 20 people or less, and so we do require or ask that you call or text the number and register your group, just so we can be prepared for that.
Yeah. So. Walk us through the Nativity Walk. What is it? What is it like?
So the first scene starts out, and there again, we try to keep it as close to the Bible as we can. So the first scene this year is going to be when the angel appears to Mary, and then the last scene would be the birth in the manger scene. And so just throughout the best we can come up with, or not come up with, but the best that we can recreate according to the Bible. Man, the angels appearing to the shepherds, what it looked like in Bethlehem, just the best we can. So it's just an interactive where you go from one to the other, just kind of going through the story.
Now, you're a Bible man, aren't you?
I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not the Bible scholar that.
But you love the Word of God.
I do love it. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
Matt
sir.
Canoles, pastor at church that's going to be hosting, Cedar Creek Cowboy Church, hosting the Nativity Walk. And what is it, 3 days it is?
Yes, sir. It'll be, starts this Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. They start at 6 o'clock and go to 8. And so every 15 minutes is about what it takes to walk through. It's about a quarter to a half a mile walk. And a lot of people are like, well, it's a long way to walk. And when I hear that, I understand. And so we try to make it as comfortable as we can. But I also think as I read through that story, there had to be absolutely nothing comfort about Joseph hauling Mary all the way to Bethlehem on a donkey. And so, man, if they can endure that, we can endure this. But it's a walk, interactive walk through the woods. But we try to do it. It takes about 15 minutes from start to finish. And so that's why we do it. We do it for 2 hours each night in 15-minute blocks. And that's why we ask for the registration, just so we can keep those groups down to about 20. So when they get to a new scene, everybody can gather up there around and everybody can hear and see good.
So I'm assuming it's on the campus of where the church is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's right there. Man, God blessed us with an awesome piece of property there in Fayetteville, and so that's what we had about 6 acres there that we really weren't doing a whole lot with. It kind of grown up in pine trees, and so we did it out in the pasture for the first couple of years, and you could kind of see the whole deal. And Eclectic did a great job. They had a huge piece of property where they put their nativity walk on, and so that's what we kind of tried to mimic. And so it winds in and out of the woods. We cut a path through the woods, and so that's what it is. Yes, sir.
So you have animals and
yes.
and people interacting there. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, there's a lot of volunteers from our church that man spent time preparing. And like I said, we try to make it as realistic as we could. When you get into Bethlehem, there's going to be chickens running around and goats and sheep, and the shepherds, they were tending sheep, the Bible says, so that's what they'll be doing on the deal. So yes, sir, we try to make it as true to life as we can.
So how do people make reservations if they got larger groups that want to come in?
There's a number, I'd be glad to give it. It's 256-510-2658. You can call that number or text that number. If you have a group, we have several churches that come the past several years, and those groups have grown, and so some of those are bringing 30 or 40 people, and so we just try to give them 2 time slots to divide that deal up. But yes, sir, if they'd call or text that number, we'd love to get their reservation in.
And people watching this morning may not have heard of the Cowboy Church, but actually on the Childersburg-Fayetteville Highway there, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, sir. I tell people the easiest thing for me is it's exactly 7 miles. If you turn off a 280 at the red light, it's exactly 7 miles off of 280 on the right there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and we're talking with Pastor Matt, who is a senior pastor at the Cedar Creek Cowboy Church, and when you tell the story of how this church has evolved, it's almost something that'll blow your mind. You write a book about of how this all came about. You talked about it a little bit earlier, but how's the church grown over the years?
Man, it has been a blessing to see, and there again, I realize and I know a lot of people around Childersburg, Fayetteville, Sylacauga, and there's a lot of people, and I tell people this story all the time, and it was I remember when we first started the church, people would come up and they would ask me or my wife, like, who's going to pastor? And she would say, well, it's going to be Matt. And the majority of them had the same answer, and it would be, oh. And it was a shock and awe, because there again, I did a terrible job of exemplifying Jesus, or even that I had a relationship with him for years. And I'm not ashamed of that, because I want people to know and see what he has done in my life.
Who is Matt Canoles?
Right now, Matt Canoles just tries to be a follower of Jesus and tries to be a good husband and a good father. He stinks at that a lot of times.
Where did God bring you from?
Man, I don't have that story. I don't have that story of overcoming addiction or of strung out on drugs or alcohol. I have the story of parents that took me to church, and I grew up in church, and I tell people I knew churchonese. I knew how to talk it. I knew how to walk it. But for so much of my life, the only way you would have known that I even had anything to do with Jesus is if you saw my truck in the parking lot between 11 and 12 on Sundays. But after that, you'd usually find me at the river or the roping pen, and there was no Jesus in that whatsoever. And so I think to me, that's the Cowboy Church. The draw on that is it's me. It's because I don't look churchy, but man, I love Jesus, and I'm so thankful for what he did in my life. And I realize that Romans 5:8 is probably my favorite verse, or is my favorite verse. And it says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so, man, I realize even in my sin, even in my running from him, man, when he was hanging on that cross, he was thinking about me. And that, man, when I really understood that, I'm like, man, I don't understand why. I understand why you would die for Mr. Jimmy. I understand why he would die for anybody watching this, but I cannot understand why he would give his life up for me, because I do not deserve it. And so, man, I just want other people to know the hope that I have in that. And so that's where we are.
All right, so you began having rodeos down there on the property.
Sir. Uh-huh.
And how is that?
Oh, it's been great. I think this would be the 6th or 7th year that we've had a professional rodeo at the church. And people ask me all the time, they're like, man, why does a church need to have a rodeo? Well, a church doesn't need to have a rodeo, but I could invite people to church. You could have me on here every day, and I could look them in the eye and invite them to come to church. And there's just some people that are never going to come to church. But we don't put the rodeos on. It's always an outside entity that puts the big rodeos on, or families that do that. And so our only requirement, we don't ask them to pay the church, make a donation. The facilities are there to use for absolutely free. But what we do ask is they let us share the gospel before it happens. And so Chris and Devin Rowland have put the rodeo on at the church for the last 3 or 4 years, and man, it's been great. And so there'll be 700-800 people there on Friday night, and 900 to 11 people there on Saturday night. And so the majority of those people are not going to come to church at Cedar Creek Cowboy Church or First Baptist or Second Baptist or First Methodist, whatever, but they're going to come and watch somebody potentially get their head smashed by a 2,000-pound bull. And so if we have their attention for 10 or 15 minutes, I just want to give them my hope, just like I just told you. So that's why we do
There's Matt, a number of people in this local area that have moved on up the food chain as far as rodeoing is concerned.
Oh, yes, sir. Well, the Rowlands, Colin and Caden Rowland are both high school rodeoing now. And then we have several kids in our church that high school rodeo and junior rodeo. And we get to host, and that's probably a cooler thing to me. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've hosted the High School Rodeo Association has come to the church for 2 days, and then the junior high rodeo gets to come to the church for 2 days. And then our church actually hosts and puts on a little junior rodeo series. It's just to help kids get started, and we do one of those a month for 3 or 4 months or 5 months through the spring and summer. So it's been good. It's been good. But there again, I do, if I had anything to say, because people often ask, why does the church do rodeo? And it's just simply to share the gospel. Yeah. And the same reason when I grew up in the 80s and 90s that a lot of churches built gymnasiums. So kids could come play basketball and they could share the gospel, and that's why we have an arena. All
right, we've got the Nativity Walk coming up Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Reservation required. You see all the information on the screen. And Matt, we appreciate you coming this morning, and keep up the good work, and to God be the glory for the things he's done.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Jimmy.
All right, Pastor Matt Canoles of Cedar Creek Cowboy Church, our guest this morning. We say goodbye with a final